Hey, everybody, welcome back to your Dawn of Autonomy podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldi, your host, CEO of P3 Tech Consulting, and publisher at Autonomy Global. We are in a month that we've dedicated to the theme of global ops. It's been sponsored by Fixar Drones, and we are super excited to have, we'll call him a regular on this show. Dr. Jack Elston is coming to us live from Boulder, Colorado. He is the CEO and co-founder of Black Swift Technologies. Great to have you back, Jack.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I love having Jack on the show because every year it's something bigger, better, new in this company and with your drones. It's been such a pleasure to follow you over the years. And what are we in year 11 now for the company or 12?
Uh, yeah, I have to think back. I mean, we technically started in 2011, so even longer than that.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, there you go. Okay, awesome. So let's jump right in, Jack. I know you, many people out there know you, but for those that don't, can you give them just a little bit about your background, your personal background?
Yeah, sure thing. We founded the company after doing tornado chasing research at the University of Colorado. At the time, there weren't a lot of autopilot options out there, and they struggled with that environment. So, literally, me and my co-founder Maciek Stachura sat down in our living room and started making autopilot systems, and that's kind of how we got it going.
I remember this well, and I love how when I ask people to tell me about yourself, you jump right into your company. Tell me
Mhm.
about yourself, like you have a PhD, like, tell them a little bit about your personal background.
Wait, you're trying to say that I'm not my company? I don't know if I could separate those
Well, your
identities.
company is you, you are your company. We all know, we all live that dream, but there's something
Yeah,
beyond your company about you.
personal background, went to the Naval Academy, wanted to be a pilot. Unfortunately, my eyesight wasn't good enough. So I transferred to Colorado because it was in state and I was poor and I could only afford in-state tuition, but it was a good school nonetheless. Um, got into skiing quite a bit. And so I decided to keep going to school because that gave me enough free time to keep doing that. And then while I was doing that, stumbled into a lot of these fun projects having to do with drones. So I kind of really got into it from there. My PhD project was actually that tornado chasing with drones, but we've done a number of different things, everything from communication relays to machine vision. And this was all back in like 2005. So this was well before a lot of the different tools have been developed nowadays.
Well, that's amazing. I don't remember that Naval Academy piece, Jack. So I just learned something new after
There you
talking
go.
to you and working with you after all of these years. So you're working on your PhD project. You have your buddy Maciek Stachora that you're in your kitchen developing, basically what spawns into Black Swift Technologies ultimately. Uh, what was the motivation to create the company? In other words, you created a drone, you created the software and the backbone for it as part of your project, but why did you decide to transition into being an entrepreneur in the drone
Yeah,
world?
that's fair. Um, a lot of it was just I wasn't really inspired by the corporate options that were available around me as far as aerospace, and I wanted to stay within the area. I really enjoy all the hiking and skiing and biking that's out here. And we just finished up that project, tornado chasing, and realized there was a huge deficiency in autopilot systems in the commercial space. I mean, almost everyone was just using what the scraps they could get that were left over from the DoD market and being able to install that in their aircraft and go and use it. And they're expensive. They were tough to integrate, tough to use, just kind of archaic because there wasn't a lot of reason to innovate. Most of them were going into target drones. And so single use, get shut down, and then that's all they had to kind of care about. When we started getting into tornadoes, we realized that the estimation that they were doing inside the autopilot really kept them within a nice flying regime, but only if it was calm outside. As soon as we got into strong winds or turbulence or anything like that, they usually lost orientation and it became very difficult for us to recover the aircraft. So we set out to just do the math and then eventually build the parts to do a full flight regime autopilot, meaning it could be upside down, it could be diving, it can be doing whatever, and it'll still recover the aircraft. And that kind of led to us doing all this extreme weather work. As you can imagine, when you're in a hurricane, when you're in a tornado, there's a lot of different disturbances out there. And we're able to reject those and then also kind of fly in some interesting ways. One of those being we've worked recently on a project to collect energy from the storm. This was part of some work I did a long time ago, kind of got manifested itself again in some work to figure out if we could fly in the upper atmosphere of Venus. But basically, it comes down to flying like an albatross crosses the ocean, where you're able to extract energy out of where there's wind and where there's not wind. So you're going back and forth between that shear region. And to be able to do that, you need fairly advanced control and fairly advanced estimation.
Wow. Okay. So it all started with this autopilot, basically for extreme conditions and maneuvers, and developed into such a large suite of products that, as they say, niches make riches. And, in your case, these extreme environments and scientific research, whether it's in Iceland or on Venus, is where you've clearly made your mark. So, all right, let's talk about then the aircraft you build around these, the avionics, right? So you have the whole package. Let's go ahead and walk through your various platforms. So you've got the S2, the S0, and the E2. Walk us kind of through each one, and let's maybe start with the S2 first.
Sure. Yeah. And actually, oddly enough, chronologically, that was the first one out of all those you just listed that came into fruition. It was one of those things where we realized we were spending an awful lot of time supporting integration of these autopilot systems into other people's planes, and it was a lot easier to just teach people how to use the aircraft themselves. We were also funded to put a instrument that we designed in combination with the University of Colorado to do soil moisture measurements inside of an aircraft as well. And that needed a lot of special things as far as a decent sized payload volume, very quiet as far as electromagnetic interference. And so we said, heck, we could build our own aircraft. So that's what the S2 eventually, well, that was how it was born. And it eventually evolved into more or less a pickup truck of the drone world. It could fly for quite a bit of time. It's pretty robust. I mean, we've had customers fly these things into trees, and we've been able to repair them and send them back to them. But it'll contain a 5-pound payload, about 8 inches in diameter, 2 feet long, which is a pretty decent sized payload. And we've used it for everything from volcano observations to those soil moisture measurements that I mentioned before, along with kind of your standard drone cameras and everything else, LiDAR units, everything you can kind of think of there.
So we just had some pictures up, and I think they were the S0 or S0. Tell me about the S0. We're going to pop those back up. And sure. I think you have 2 configurations of the S0. Why did you develop it, and what does it do?
Sure thing. Yeah, so the one you see sitting here kind of poking down in the grass is like that because it doesn't really have any sort of landing gear or anything like that. It's not designed to land. It's air deployed, so you can kick it out of a crewed aircraft traveling very quickly. We designed it mostly for use with the NOAA P3, so that's the aircraft they use for hurricane hunting. It'll drop out of that vehicle at cruise speed. Generally, they drop it at about 8,000 to 12,000 feet because they're also in the storm doing sampling. It goes down, deploys itself, starts flying around. It'll fly around for the storm for about 110 minutes or so. Wow. And it can get down into the parts of the storm that are really difficult for any other measurement technique to get down into. And that's usually from surface to about just a couple hundred feet off the surface. So flying down through all the sea spray, winds, nasty conditions, things like that, and recording some very interesting data that really hasn't been seen before. And one of the more interesting things about it is last year during Hurricane Milton, we got the Guinness Book World Record for the fastest wind speed ever recorded on Earth.
What?
Yeah.
How did I not know this? That is so cool. And wasn't there something about the movie Twisters 2? Like for those out there that watch the movie, spoiler alert, it's kind of track Twisters, the original one, where they had these sensors that deployed like out of a truck and got sucked into the thing. But you do it kind of from the opposite perspective with is it with the S0?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about
that. Yeah, it's kind of both directions we're trying to approach it from. And we'd like to make it so that you could deploy multiple diseases all at once, where you're getting through the permission to do that. So we can do more or less the swarm within the fully characterize a storm at once. But as far as for the hurricane work, there's 3 different modules they wanted us to develop, which is kind of cool. The vehicle itself actually has an understanding of what a hurricane looks like on board. And so the meteorologists, when they're making use of it to do their sampling, they say, hey, go find the center of the storm, keep tracking that so that each time you get an estimate of the center storm, you know how fast it's moving. And then it could get a velocity out of that. And why that's important is you're off by just a meter per second on how fast that storm's moving. That's 60 miles along a coastline every day that you may or may not be hitting. And so it's
Wow.
pretty essential as far as being able to give people a heads up to evacuate or do whatever they need to do to prepare for the storm that's coming. Excuse me. So you could do that. You can tell them to go find the maximum winds in the storm. So it'll actually, you could drop it in the eye anywhere. It'll go out. It'll find where the maximum winds in the storm are, and that's usually just inside the eye wall. But the eye is not completely circular, even though it kind of looks like that on a map. It's rough, a little bit tricky to follow. You imagine it's a natural phenomenon. And so the aircraft will keep itself within those maximum winds and report back to the P3 what those winds are, how far away from the center of the storm they are. And these all get fed into that model so they can figure out whether the storm's intensifying, how quickly it'll intensify, things like that. And so really the aircraft is just, you set the altitude you want it to fly at, you tell it these missions that you want it to do, and a light goes green, you drop it out of the aircraft. It's all fairly automatic. And so they don't have to babysit it. The P3 can continue doing its mission. It actually flies through the storm in different regions, dropping different things called drop zones, and also using all of its radar instruments that it has on board to sample the rest of the parts of the storm. So, this is augmenting the data that they're getting. It's sending all of this information back from this tiny little 3-pound drone. We just tested it this year out to 400 kilometers away to the
Wow.
P3. And then that information's changed to a National Weather Service format and sent immediately off to their server so they can ingest it into their models.
That is absolutely unbelievable. But it doesn't end there. You have an E2 as well. So tell us about that one.
Yeah, that's the multi-rotor that we put together. It was originally designed for a group in Spain that's working with Siemens Gamesa to do offshore wind turbine inspection. So naturally, we had to make it fairly robust to the environment that's out there, seawater, rain. They don't put these things where they're calm, so it's usually fairly windy most of the time. And when you're maintaining just a couple of foot standoff from a very expensive blade, it has to be able to hold that position quite well. They outfit it with a LiDAR and a camera, and it's able to go scan all the different blades of the turbine within about 15 minutes and give back a detailed report of the maintenance that's required for it.
Unbelievable. So 3 drones, a couple different configurations, lots of different use cases. Let's start talking about some of those use cases. I mean, we hit the hurricane one a little bit with the S0, the wind turbine with the E2. The S2 was your first one, and I remember some volcanic measurements, I think, with that one. But let's talk about soil moisture mapping. Like, this is a really unique use case. Not a lot of people are talking about it, but so critically important, not just for precision agriculture, but for even the Department of Defense, like my former service, the Air Force, to put out runways, right? Like in a bare base location, is it a good idea to put it here? The soil is going to basically give you that answer. So tell us a little bit about this solution and how what you're doing with soil moisture, and tell us which drone is the best one for this.
Mm-hmm.
How it is better even than satellite technology readings.
Sure. Well, the satellite technology augmented. I mean, it's always one of those things where you want the full picture, but you also want some very detailed parts of it. So you want that revisit time whenever you need to get the information, and you want something much higher resolution. So that's where the drone comes into play. The E2 can carry this, so multi-rotor version. Higher resolution, can't cover as much, takes a little longer to cover that area. And then the S2 can also carry it as well, so you get much bigger swaths of land out of that. For the project with the Air Force, we're actually looking at soil integrity. So we can take that soil moisture measurement along with a couple other variables and tell you if you can drive heavy equipment over it. The idea being if they have a forward airbase, well, it's unimproved, usually it's not paved, it's grass, it's dirt, it's whatever. We can fly over it beforehand and say, hey, you can land here without getting stuck. This is essential when you're just trying to drop off supplies and get out of there, especially if you're thinking about things like island hopping and stuff like that. It becomes very important. We've expanded that to use with doing soil integrity for railroads. So when you get very wet seasons, they can have derailments because it moves the rails just enough to be able to derail the car. You could look at landslides, and then various other areas where you can think of trafficability. So moving heavy equipment around, whether that being transporting goods and services or whether that's doing construction.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about construction here in a minute, but as I'm listening to you, Jack, I'm thinking, man, you need to be talking to Ted Manges from Suncor Energy. Suncor sponsored Energy Month, which was in May, and he was talking about for a lot of their enterprise energy operations, there's these dirt roads where exactly what you're talking about, they have to drive heavy trucks, and it's constant monitoring, because if those trucks slide off those roads, it's going to be a big problem, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to connect you after the show because I think they're actually doing some research on this with a local university, if I remember correctly,
Okay, sounds
up in
great.
Canada. But we need to tell him about you. And I don't know if he's listening here today, so I'll send him the video too. But great use cases across the board there using 2 of your drones as possible. So let's talk more about the volcanoes because that is so fun. And you did this in a number of locations, but I think maybe more recently, Costa Rica.
Yeah, that's correct. That was the last one we were in. Oddly enough, that wasn't our deployment. We were training. So
Oh,
there's a group at NASA that's getting into a lot of these different monitoring capabilities. And so they have one of our S2s, and they wanted to be able to teach a large group of them how to use it. And instead of doing the kind of boring classroom approach, they said, heck, we need to go figure out how much CO2 is on the side of a volcano down in Costa Rica anyway. Let's just go do training down there. So it was kind of fun. We met up with them down there, and they got a really unique experience as far as being able to go out in the field. I mean, this was in fairly dense jungle, try and figure out how to operate a fixed wing aircraft within this at higher altitudes and rugged terrain, and then get really low to make CO2 measurements. And what they're looking at is out of the vents on the side of the volcano, generally you get a couple of different gases, CO2 being one of them, and it disperses very quickly once it gets into the atmosphere. So you have to get really low in order to be able to measure where it's higher concentrations. And what they were looking at is they're trying to figure out what happens with plants when they're sitting in an immersed CO2 environment for quite some time and how well they respond to that. And so what they wanted to do is fly around this entire volcano, map the whole thing, and kind of get this idea of where are these higher concentrations of CO2? Is it flowing downhill and pooling here and the plants are in it, or is it coming directly out of this vent? And so not only were we doing training, but we were also mapping an entire volcano for where trace gases are coming out. So it was a pretty cool project.
Wow, that is cool. Do you know the answer? Like what in terms of the plant life? Is it thriving in that environment or is it like killing the plants all around there?
Sure, yeah, not to pretend to be a botanist, but from what I gleaned from
I'm just
talking with them,
curious.
they said that basically there's a point where they're increasing their production of oxygen and thriving, and then there is a certain point where it just kind of falls off and everything dies. And
Yeah.
so you got to be careful not to push past that point.
Oh, interest. Well, you learned that using drones, and that's really incredible in Costa Rica. Again, this is Global Ops Month, and you can see where this guy right here is a globetrotter. So really cool. Mexico. You've been down there recently, and tell us about what you've been doing in Mexico.
So we're actually heading down there in November, December. One of
Oh,
the
so that's coming
volcanoes,
up.
yeah, it's coming up. One
Okay,
of
cool.
the fairly tall, like above 18,000 foot volcanoes down there has recently become fairly active. And so, as part of the USGS's charge, they also do global volcano monitoring because volcanoes all over the world affect travel and trade and everything else, and the US needs to know how to respond to that. And so we're going to go down there just outside of Mexico City. It's a little tricky because the airspace is right next to the airport. And so we
Oh,
got to make
wow.
sure we stay out of approach vectors and everything else. So we're coordinating with them. But being able to operate our newest vehicle, the S3, which we haven't even talked about here, there's no photos or anything yet because it's brand new.
Oh, okay.
Uh, but it's vertical takeoff and landing, 4 meters wingspan, so pretty big aircraft.
Wow.
They can carry quite a bit of equipment, and it should have about a 20,000 foot service ceiling. So that's where we're really testing this out, is dragging all this equipment on top of this volcano. Now they do hike up there occasionally and go put instruments up there, but from what I've heard, it's incredibly rough hike. It's very loose volcanic material, and it's actually fairly dangerous. Several people have died hiking to this volcano. So
Yikes.
the idea is if we can get those same instruments up there to go do monitoring on a regular basis for them, they don't have to go hike up and go do that.
Well, that's awesome. Tell me more about this S3 because, first of all, you said it can go up to 20,000 feet?
Yeah, yeah.
Holy shnikes. And you said 4 foot wingspan?
4 meters.
4
So
meter.
yeah,
Okay. And so
so like a 12 foot wingspan ish. Yeah.
how much does it weigh?
Right now it's sitting at about 25 pounds or so, so not too
Wow. So
heavy.
it's light. How much can it carry though?
We're right now we're just shooting to use those legacy S2 payloads, so the 5 pound payloads that I talked about before. That makes it so that we're able to do the soil moisture monitoring, the volcano monitoring, a bunch of other things. We're making it really modular though, so we can swap out payloads for batteries and all sorts of things. Because we'd like to get the flight time up to several hours. The other thing that's a huge improvement over the S2, other than a lot of the AI things we're looking to put into it, is the fact that it has the two rotors in the front that kind of tilt down. So when it's taking off, they're vertical, and then they tilt down to be able to transition to forward flight. But that also gives us very fast dash speed, well over 100 miles an hour. And so now we can start getting into those really difficult to access regions where you have, a lot of times we get up to these volcanoes, there's 50, 60 knot winds at the top of it that we're trying to fight through. And so that really allows us to conduct our mission even when it's windy up top there.
And remind me, Jack, the S2 is you have to launch it off of what do you call it?
Yeah, it's a pneumatic rail.
Thank you. Pneumatic rail. Sorry, my brain wasn't working there for a
Yeah, no
second, but
problem.
I remember the launch mechanism.
Mhm,
And so this one is like a true, it's a VTOL.
mhm. Yeah, fully VTOL. While the rail was man portable, it was heavy. Um, it still, if it worked perfectly all the time, still does for all the S2 flights that we do. It gets it up to 40 miles an hour by the end of I think it's like a 10-foot long rail is all.
Yeah.
And then we could take it into all sorts of these remote locations. So the rail itself wasn't really too much of the problem logistically. It was more the landing. We needed something that we could not have to have a nice clear area. And yeah, it'll set itself down in probably about 100-foot long strip. But you're having to worry about the approach vector and which way the wind's blowing and all these other things. So the VTOL really lets you just kind of just say, hey, go do your mission, come back, and it does it on its own. With the idea, we'd like to expand its capability to do this like prolonged missions where you just send it out and say, like, look, here's this huge region that we want to sample. Say we're measuring methane over that whole region.
Mhm.
Go map that out, and then when you're done, let us know. It goes out, it flies a mission. When it kind of gets low in battery, it lands because it can pick that out with machine vision and a bunch of other stuff. Sits there recharging batteries with solar, takes back off, and then goes continue mapping. So we'd like to get to this autonomy where it's just you set it out, you give it where it wants to map, it reports back occasionally over satellite, and then you go collect it when it's done.
Wow. So constant iterations, constant improvements along the way. The S3 is the next big thing. Testing this out in Mexico in November. When do you, and I'm sure it's going to go great just because everything you do does. When do you think that could be available commercially?
We're hoping to, really that Mexico operation will be its first test piece, but at that point in time, it should be ready commercially. So by the end of this year.
Sweet. You heard it here, everybody. Need a Christmas present. There you go. Buy an S3. It might not fit under your tree or
Yeah,
menorah
we
or
could put a
whatever
big
you
red
have
bow on
there.
it. Yeah, we could put a red bow on it like those Lexus commercials you can put in your
That's
driveway.
right. In the driveway, there's the S3. "Honey, look what I got you for Christmas."
Right.
Anyway, all right, let's transition to wildfires now. Sadly, the world has been on fire. It continues
Mhm.
to be a light. It's a constant issue globally, and you've been really helping in terms of wildfire observations. Tell us a little bit about that. I know we've got a couple videos, so walk us through what we're going to be seeing here. Let's go ahead and roll
Sure
one.
thing. One of the con ops that we're using for the vertical takeoff and landing version of the S0. So same meteorological core, although we can outfit it with cameras and a bunch of other things on it. And it also has that tilt rotor ability, so it can fly over 100 100 miles an hour as well, despite being only about 4 pounds. So this one's small. The idea is you deploy it as soon as detect lightning strikes, and it's able to go out and figure out what's going on with that. Those fires that are due to lightning won't pop up on the satellite until they get much larger. So the hope is you can go identify them beforehand and go figure out where they are and what's going on with them in enough time to be able to put them out before they turn into something significant. It can also provide support during the fire. So doing fire outlines at night when you don't have other aviation traffic. You can even do that during black flag, red flag days. In addition, it can also collect information. We did a project with the National Center for Atmospheric Research where we just did 2 of these aircraft. So not a lot of data, but went up to areas that identify were big question marks for weather models. Basically, it's the terrain made it do weird things, or the moisture, or whatever it was in the area that was causing these impacts. The cool thing is they developed this very high resolution weather model that can tell you where it doesn't know things very well. And so we take those aircraft out and go do profiling with them in the early morning, feed that into the weather model, and we showed significant improvement in that weather model even after 8 hours of evolving it. So 8 hours ahead of time, we had a much better idea of what was going to happen with the winds, with the rain, everything else that was going to happen that day to help people do wildland firefighting. One of the more interesting ones that we've gotten into recently that I didn't expect, and this is involving the S2, is basically turning it into like an EW platform. So we're putting all sorts of electronic sensing equipment on it, and the idea is to go determine where there's non-cooperative drones flying in the area. There have been a lot of incidences recently where people have been flying their own personal vehicles, getting video of fires and things like that, but getting in the way of wildland firefighting ops. And so there have been several collisions, one of which was during the LA fire, where they have
I remember
actually
that. Very high profile.
strike the aircraft. And so one of the things they're really interested in right now is locating those people that are doing operations and shutting them down so that they continue fighting the fire without having to worry about getting hit by a drone.
Wow, it's almost like I don't want to call it counter drone or anti drone. It's an airspace awareness mechanism where you're flying your drone to detect what other drones are out here right now. That's a really, it's a critical use case for wildland firefighting in particular. Like you said, the LA situation, it's not unusual. And sadly, too many times people are flying private drones in the area where you've got your firefighters trying to actually put out these fires or observe what's happening. Congress has actually in I think the last and the previous one, they keep upping the game in terms of criminalizing this behavior, and the penalties keep increasing just because it's such a significant problem. So that's awesome that you're able to do that. But we talked about the drones, and you know, and it all started with the autopilot, but you also created a flight management system, your Swift core. So tell us about that.
Yeah, this was really before all of the open source stuff was available. That really hadn't started out. It was just a small university project out in France at that point in time, France and Switzerland. So out of necessity, we developed our own communications protocol, our own user interface, and then our own ground station, wrapped that all together with the avionics and called it the flight management system. So it's all of those things in tandem. The user interface is, obviously the most forward-facing one, the one that gets the most attention. We like it because we feel like it's pretty intuitive, even for doing these very difficult missions. As we mentioned, it's able to run our aircraft doing these hurricane things, but it's also, we've used it with, there's a group that didn't have any experience with UAS of any sort, hadn't even flown like a DJI or anything like that, and wanted to go do sampling out in Greenland. And we were able to train them in just 2 days because they are going out very quickly to go do this. And they did 100 successful flights one summer in Greenland just after 2 days of training. So I think that kind of
Wow,
speaks to the intuitive nature of it.
that's
We've
awesome.
integrated it with a number of different things too. So it'll connect up with the NASA Mission Tool Suite. NOAA has their own stuff called AirOps. There's a bunch of other different groups that are running various different flavors of the Tactical Awareness Kit, which it hooks in with. So pretty flexible as far as like all the different data sets that it can pull in, display to the user, and then also work with other software.
Yeah, the tactical awareness kit, or TAC, that is something we're hearing more and more about. Started kind of on the military side, but definitely has made its way over to public safety and, kind of disaster response. Really important integration that you're able to do with TAC. That's amazing. I've got a guy that writes for me for Autonomy Global, Zev Nadler. He's a big TAC guy. And actually, Jason Day from the Austin Department of Public Safety recently authored an article about TAC and the use by public safety. I think he called it "TAC is the Way." It was a very popular article, so very cool. And next week, we've got Reese, RIIS, and Godfrey Nolan's going to be talking a little bit about TAC and what he's doing with that too. So, I mean, it's the thing, right? Like when you're trying to have that kind of situational awareness of what's going on and be able to integrate with TAC is really awesome.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see what else. There's so many things you do. We mentioned construction, but I want to actually talk about it. So tell me about what you're doing in construction and mining.
Yeah, so construction we already kind of hit on a little bit. That's bringing in that soil moisture sensor and being able to give a heads up as far as you're able to go take the equipment out, go do work that day. And you can imagine if you're building, say, a solar farm, you want that up as soon as possible. As soon as you're generating energy, you're generating money. And so any delays that you have in there starts actually costing you money. And so being able to immediately go tell when you're going to have a down day and things like that is not only important to the construction companies, which have things in their clauses that basically say this is when you have to have this done by, but then also giving a heads up to the people that are hoping to start operating the solar site and start collecting money. The mining side of things is another interesting one. There's a lot of different areas that are difficult to get water to, as you can imagine. Colorado being one of them. You have to get it all the way up in the mountains, truck it in. It's quite expensive. And they're required to occasionally drive these trucks around with the water in it. I think you've probably seen them when they're doing construction on roads and things like that, and actually spray down water. It not only keeps the soil at kind of a level they need it to be to do their work, but it also mitigates dust. But the problem is they don't have any feedback. They don't know, hey, did I put down enough water? Did I put down too much water? Could I save money if I stopped putting down that water? And so the idea being we can fly overhead and tell them immediately, hey, there's enough water down to be able to do the dust mitigation. Not only that, but if you do a little less in this area, you're kind of hurting your trafficability and things like that. So it all kind of ties the soil integrity together with the soil moisture and that mining product.
Wow, that is so cool. And when you think about mining, that's critical infrastructure, but you're doing other things with critical infrastructure like bridges and kind of inspection work. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, a lot of that's centered around the technology that was developed for the wind turbine inspection. So combining very high resolution video with LiDAR and then the autonomy to be able to just go do those things at a press of a button. And you don't have to be training people or having somebody even babysit the thing constantly with a set of joysticks trying to look around and figure out what's going on. You want to have it at some point in time where you could just say, like, look, here's the object in front of me, go inspect it. And so that's a lot of the things that we're working on as far as inspection.
Okay, and then we mentioned mapping in terms of the CO2 areas around volcanoes, but you're also doing mapping for folks in flood zones and agricultural applications. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. The sensor itself can give a heads up as far as flash flooding. It could tell you when the soil is saturated, when you're more at risk for that to happen. It also can be used for mitigating erosion, for also telling when a landslide might happen. So that soil gets saturated again by water. We can fly over ahead of it and say, hey, we got to close this road. It's dangerous up above. This soil is going to move, or gives a heads up to communities and things like that that might be affected by landslides. And so there's plenty of stuff that we can do in combination, again, with the satellites. So use the satellites to get that whole global picture of what's going on. You identify areas of concern, and that's when we go out and go deploy our aircraft to go specifically look at areas and see, hey, is this going to be a problem moving forward?
We're seeing, we talked about wildfires and how they keep increasing globally, but flash flooding seems to be the latest thing in the headlines. That horrific situation down there in Texas recently. Just in terms of the technology that you can bring to an area like that, how could a group like the ones in Texas that just experienced that, how could they prevent or help to prepare for something like what happened? Using your drones as a preventive tool.
Sure. Well, not being an expert in soil science or
Yeah,
meteorology or other stuff, it's a little tough for me to comment on that exact incident that happened. I mean, that one was pretty rapid too. That, as far as I
yeah,
understand, it was a very quick intensification where there wasn't a lot of information available to the people. I think, as far as I can tell from all the different work that we've done, the best thing to do there is have a better model of what's going to happen with the atmosphere ahead of time. And so that kind of goes back to the work that we were doing with NCAR, where they're using their latest and greatest, high resolution, takes into terrain, takes into account a bunch of other things, weather models that we feed with very targeted measurements of the atmosphere, measurements of the ground temperatures, all sorts of different stuff to be able to give them the best possible information. So that when stuff like that happens, they can better predict it, ahead of time instead of just knee jerk saying, "Uh-oh, this is happening," and there's not enough time to get anybody out.
yeah. That is such an incredible use case and so important for saving lives. All right, let's kind of transition. We talked about your various drones. We talked about your basically kind of command software and everything, your entire ecosystem, the various use cases you're doing. And as we look to the future, Jack, besides what you're doing in Mexico with the S3, which should be available by the end of the year, obviously you're moving towards more and more autonomy, more complex operations. How are you preparing to scale globally for that?
A lot of the autonomy really does factor into that. As a lot of people know that haven't just continuously gone and done operations just in their backyard where you're familiar with the terrain, weather, all sorts of other things. Once you start doing global operations, it starts becoming a lot less predictable because you're leaving the area that you understand and know. So, as much of that autonomy that we can put on the aircraft and the user interface to kind of take all those decision making issues and use a much larger, I don't know, pot to draw from as far as the information in the area and be able to make those decisions for you, that makes these operations easier. I mean, our goal from the beginning is just to make this a tool. I mean, realistically, the only reason why the work that we do is important is the data that we're getting back from them. It's not because we're flying cool aircraft. And so, as much as we like the aircraft, it's important that we kind of abstract that from it. So we want the aircraft to just go do whatever it does very easily, and so it's just data coming back. It's another source. It's like satellite data. I mean, the people out there making use of that aren't usually the ones operating there. The satellites, they're benefiting from that information. We want the vehicles to be, at that point as well. And so being able to work globally on that means, being able to go do these operations in difficult conditions and difficult terrain. And so that's all the different nuances we've been working towards.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, you've been doing beyond visual line of sight for a while. I mean, you've been doing it probably since the inception of your work, if I recall
Mhm.
correctly. Even in,
Yeah, back when it was the Wild Wild West and there were no rules
yeah,
about
there were no rules.
about
Well,
beyond that
people are
sight. Yeah.
still, doing it as by like a waiver at this point, and everybody's highly anticipating this Part 108 that still hasn't come out yet, despite the fact that we're doing a policy symposium next week. But as you think about all the experience you've garnered over time, what are the best tips you'd have for those people and companies that are looking to be effective in extreme environments doing beyond visual line of sight, just based on what you've gathered over the years?
I mean, you should just buy our stuff. Problem solved.
Well, that's the easy answer.
I mean, a lot of it is careful planning still nowadays. That's why we're kind of talking about automating a lot of this. That mission that you mentioned down in Costa Rica, being able to fly that low, close to terrain. I mean, we were skimming treetops by just tens, maybe hundreds of feet,
Yikes.
with a vehicle traveling at 40 miles an hour. So there's a lot of pre-planning that goes into that. Getting better data sources to be able to do that is critical, and be able to combine that all together with, like, vegetation in the area, vision on board the aircraft, doing any sort of, bringing other data sources in as far as where do you expect the winds to be. If you pop over a ridge and you all of a sudden hit a downdraft and you're only flying tens of feet off the forest, that's not a good place to be. So, I mean, there's a ton of work that goes into it. It's a lot more than just letting the aircraft go, keeping your eye on it and saying, all right, it's fine.
Yeah.
And I certainly agree it's paramount that we have to be careful about getting into airspaces where there could be other vehicles operating. And so a lot of the work that we've done beyond line of sight, generally we'll just go and get a TFR just to keep it simple, keep it so people report back to us. But we're still actively sensing the environment. We have ADSB in on board our aircraft. We're coordinating with all the different local officials. So it's still, unfortunately, a fairly tedious process. Hopefully all these different regulations that are coming in and the advances in technology make it easier. But in order to do it safely and routinely, it really is just a lot of pre-planning at this point in time.
Well, not only that, but training, right? I mean, that whole mission in Costa Rica revolved around training in the first
Mhm.
place. So, I think that's going to be something, you can have muscle memory in something like this and get the time of experience over, through the number of hours you log. But every mission is going to be different. And so I agree 100%, Jack. Hope is not a plan and planning is key. So, as you look forward, you've got Mexico coming up. You've got the big launch of the S3. What else can we expect from Black Swift Technologies through the end of this year and maybe into 2026?
Sure. We've got a couple of different fun projects that we're working on with the S0 itself, combining the air deployed one with the vertical takeoff and landing one, where they're working together as a swarm to be able to accomplish various different objectives, whether that be triangulating a signal or just, as we talked about before, the twister idea, getting a ton of these things up into a storm and being able to simultaneously sample a bunch of different parts of the storm. It's one of the projects we're working on. One of the other more interesting ones is we've started working with the Navy with the air deployed vehicle as well. Instead of doing meteorology, we've put a rubidium atom based magnetometer in there. So it's an incredibly sensitive magnetometer, and we can fly over large bodies of water and tell you if there's a magnetic signal there. So that's another interesting one that we're working on moving
So the
forward.
magnetic signal, are they looking for mines? Are they looking for like hidden submarines or maybe all the above?
Yes.
Okay, the answer would be yes, and if I told you more, I'd have to kill you. So, so really cool. So do you have to fly low to do that?
Uh-huh. Yeah, but
Yeah.
fortunately in the ocean, it's a little easier than flying over treetops. Waves
Wow.
are
I
much
wouldn't think
much
it
more
would be
regular.
because, I mean, you know this, Jack, right? You're doing all this weather, modeling and, sensing for weather modeling. Not only do wildfires have their own weather, kind of generate their own weather patterns, but so does the ocean.
Mhm.
So wow.
Yeah, so it's fortunately benefiting from a lot of the work that we've been doing recently with NOAA. We used to have a laser altimeter that we were using to determine how far we are off the ocean surface. And that works fine as long as you're not in torrential downpour, which turns out hurricanes have torrential downpour.
Right.
So we swapped that out to using a very small radar unit. So we're able to get kind of looking at the surface of the ocean. We're able to get wave height. We're able to get our distance from the waves, and then pre-plan so that we can go over those swells while staying as slow as possible. Because the swells in hurricanes can get up to 30 plus feet high. And so when
Wow.
you're flying at about that altitude, you got to be very careful about where that ocean surface is. Not to mention the fact that we're usually moving at about 200 plus miles an hour because we got the wind behind us as well. So you're going over that surface very quickly. And
Yeah.
so taking that information and distilling it into something where we're just flying over usually benign ocean surface is, I guess that makes it seem a little easier for us.
That's amazing. So I want to kind of end with a little bit of the accolades that you've acquired recently. And you've got to actually, I say a little bit, it's almost like there's a whole list of them here. SIBRs you've garnered, awards that the company has been recognized for. Let's quickly roll through those. And then I want to make sure you have some time for some concluding remarks and you get the chance to tell people how they actually can work with you or buy your stuff. So let's kind of talk about some of these recent big announcements.
Sure. I mean, we have an awesome technical team here, so I'm not going to take full credit for all these things for sure.
Of
Um,
course.
Fortunately, I get to be the one to talk to everyone about it. But yeah, we recently, what was the award for we got for the best small UAS in the actually just period, which was
Yeah. Oh, yeah. At
appreciated.
Exponential, I remember because I sent you the email like, hey, congrats. You got Small UAS of the Year Commercial
Right. And
Applications Award as part of that Inside Unmanned Systems Vanguard Awards at
right.
Exponential.
Yeah, and then a lot of the other awards that we've been getting, you mentioned the SBRs and things like that. I mean, those we've kind of talked through a lot of those. It's starting to again to do some additional work with the Navy. That's two of the different awards that we received there. We received well, we're continuing to do work with NOAA, so that's kind of like on a year by year basis. But we just had another purchase of vehicles for this hurricane season that we're working on preparing right now. And we're continuing to work again with other entities between NASA, the Air Force, on all sorts of these other applications. The magnetometer one, that's another one we're working with the Air Force. We just recently worked with them to pick up some initial work for dropping these out of KC-135 tankers to go map the magnetic field in the Pacific. So like all sorts of different fun stuff kind of coming down the pipe.
Wow, that's amazing. And by the way, everybody, Black Swift Technologies was also listed on the Defense Post's top 100 companies advancing drone technology in 2025, among other things. So the awards keep coming, the accolades, the funding, and so proud of you, Jack, and everything you and the Black Swift Technologies team has done. But as we dial off here, we get ready to dial off. Please tell everybody how they can reach you, how they can learn more, how they can engage with Black Swift Technologies.
Yeah, sure. I mean, plenty of this information is up on our website, on our social media, YouTube. You've got a ton of episodes with our information on
I
there
do.
too. And then you're welcome to email us. There's all that. There's a newsletter that we put out weekly. You could sign up for, or monthly that you can sign up for on our website. And so, various different ways to kind of get information about what we're up to lately.
All right, very good. From defense applications to critical infrastructure to scientific research and everything in between. That's what Black Swift Technologies is doing. Thank you for all the updates. You heard about the S3 here first. I can't wait to see this thing in action and hear more about how it went down in Mexico after November. But thank you again, Jack, for giving us the big updates about everything you're doing. And thank you for everything you do, not only for the industry, but of course, globally for society, especially in terms of the research projects that you assist with. So that's all she wrote, everybody. We are out here.